Warning! This episode of Cleaning Out the Library contains graphic depictions of pixelated blood, flashing lights, strong language, and violence, as well as discussion of topics that may not be suitable for all ages. Viewer discretion is advised. If I asked you to think of an FPS game with intense gunfights and a huge arsenal of weapons, what would your first thought be? Doom? Quake? ULTRAKILL? New question. Think of an FPS game with huge gunfights and a wide arsenal of weapons, but you're up against a cult that keeps fighting you every step of the way. Maybe now you're thinking something more like Farcry 5. DUSK feels like you put all of those games into a blender, and then you shoved in a secret ingredient and you added a straw. Don't worry, I'll tell you what the secret ingredient is later. But before I do, what even is DUSK? And no, I don't mean the word, not the thing that comes after Twilight. What is DUSK the game? Well, DUSK is a surprise smash hit by indie icon David Szymanski. You may recognize his work: Iron Lung, Chop Goblins, Squirrel Stapler, The Moon Sliver, or, personally the only horror game I can play through, The Music Machine. However, if you don't recognize any of those names, you may be familiar with the work of his brothers, John and Evan. Those two are the ones that developed My Friendly Neighborhood. The three of them even collaborated to bring us Secret Agent Wizard Boy and the International Crime Syndicate. Jesus, and I thought Bomb Rush Cyberpunk was a mouthful. I also have that in the library, so if you want to see an episode on it someday, let me know in the comments. Not only does DUSK have some real talent at the top, there are some pretty big names working on it too. It was released by New Blood Interactive, same company that published ULTRAKILL and Faith, that really cool looking game with all the rotoscoping, you know the one. I only mention this because Dave Oshry, one of the founders of New Blood, was the one that tweeted out the background lore to the game. Alright, grab your sickles and ammo belt, follow after me. I think it's time we head for DUSK. There once was a man who lived in a town, but while he was away, it burned to the ground. He returned home one day to find everything gone. He was hung upon meat hooks, but survived until dawn. Cringy voice acting aside, that's the backstory that we get for the game. After waking up on some meat hooks and being filled with rage, our character decides to break out. He doesn't have a name. A lot of players call him the Intruder or Dusk Dude. So for the recap part of this video, I'll just call him Kathy, say he's here for the HOA. Look, if I'm getting hunted by scary guys with chainsaws, I'm at least going to have my fun with it. Kathy, armed with 2 sickles and trapped in a basement surrounded by cultists, has only one option if he wants to make it out alive. He's got to fight back. As you might be able to guess, this is another game where the story takes a backseat to the gameplay. So as I show off the levels, I'll fill you in on what's happening. Here's your warning that there will be spoilers for the game's story ahead. However, who knows how much of it is correct? I'm just theorizing about what I have to work with here. The first sets of levels take place in the rural outskirts of Pennsylvania. Kathy wakes up in the basement of a house crawling with bag-headed chainsaw wielders and these floating wizards. They all have official names according to the in-game code, but I'm just going to call them Mikes and Martins. Ooh, and outside we have the horses with horns. Still calling them horses. You kind of follow a linear path forward. In fact, even look at the map screen. You're in the rural hills of Pennsylvania. You start in a cabin, move to a farmyard, reach a chapel, then you follow the cultists through the sewer tunnels, up at a sawmill. You know what? How about we go through the levels as a set? Starting in the Foothills. You wake up in a basement. You can probably see the reference of the chainsaw-wielding mics are going for off the bat. Heavyset person with a chainsaw, something hiding their identity. It's Leatherface. A whole crew of them. The inspiration for the Martins is also pretty on point, although maybe instead of saying they're in a crew, I would say they're in a clan. On the front of the robes, they have a special mark. This is the sign of the cult. Every time you see it, you'll know there are some shenanigans afoot. Has anyone ever used the term shenanigans to describe what a cult is doing? Whatever. The horses I pointed out are named in file Black Phillips, another horror movie reference calling back to the Vivitch, marking them more as possessed goats than horses. I'll be fully honest though, I'd rather fight Pinkie Pie than throw hands with Japheth when he's singing. I hear he's prepared. When you make it to the barnyard, there's even a really cool bit of foreshadowing, and there's 2 new enemies. You get to see how the cultists treat outsiders here. Best keep up the aggression before you end up in his position. Even though Martins and the horses have been using magic, this is the first time you actually get to see something slip its shackles more than it should be able to. If you weren't certain before this that there was more to this cult than just simple delusion, here's your first sign that there's something really wrong. The scarecrows come to life. I mean, that's gotta be an HOA violation, right? They just hop right off their poles and they have scary aim with their shotguns. Yeah, they have shotguns too. How is something without eyes able to blast me so easily? I'm guessing there's just some shenanigans going on. It's the same way that the horses are able to use magic missile despite being wild-shaped. There's a joke for the 3 of you that will get it. You also learned something else about Pennsylvania. There's a rat problem. That's it. I mentioned the 2 new enemies. You got the no-scope scarecrow and mice. Okay, you know what? Not entirely accurate. The scarecrow do, in fact, aim. After the farm, you can find their chapel and follow them below, where you see them operating in the sewers. While down there, you are forced to fight the flushed-away pet of every Floridian, the Intoxicator. Dusk has a really strange structure, huh? One moment you're in a tense gunfight and outnumbered, then the next, you're fighting an alligator in the sewers. Sometimes, silly just sets the tone for scary. Once you flush the boss, you're able to head through the pipes and soon come out near an old sawmill and a set of mines. I have a whole section later about praise, but for now I really want to just gush about the environmental storytelling. Notice how the top of this sawmill has a hunting rifle and it's wide open? There's nobody up here. This wasn't made by a person to attack intruders from. Whoever made this area wanted to fight back. Unfortunately, we know it wasn't enough. Make it far enough and you'll discover the old mine. Hey, I mentioned that a few seconds ago. It's been shut down for reasons. But it's also being blocked by my least favorite enemy in the first set of levels. Gertrude! They don't want to pay their HOA dues, so it's time to teach them a lesson. In another cool bit of environmental storytelling, you can even see there's a bunch of water filling up the mines. I don't think it's confirmed anywhere, but I wouldn't be too shocked if they just flooded. Also, they have one of the dumbest jokes that I've seen in a game that actually caught me off guard. And at this point, the mines are also the first chapter where any aspect of horror starts to show. Sure, you're fighting supernatural enemies, but you have ways to fight back. Why would you even need to be scared? The tight tunnels, constant growling in the walls, and jump scare appearances of enemies are a few pretty good reasons. Make it through the tunnels, and you pop up on their commune. There are a few silos hosting a few monsters, a set of giant unworthy martins that are erroneously referred to by their dead name. Just gotta get through here and you're almost at your goal. The next level starts, and it lets you know what you have to do right from the jump. You have to get through the gate. Wherever the heck that is. Ooh, and luckily, the Navy is here to help you enforce the HOA's ruling.
Not the Navy!
Alright, never mind. Do what you do best. It's time to enter the titular ghost town, Dusk. Gonna pause the synopsis just to give a little bit of love real quick. Dusk makes the atmosphere work so well. If you take this path earlier in the level, you can see the giant gate and every sign around it is telling you not to go in there. You don't really even get to see the gate open. You have to go around this other side to press the buttons. After that, even though I'd cleared out the area of enemies, I had to hype myself up just to go behind the gate. There are even a few more examples of this throughout the game. I'll point them out when we get there. Up next, we gotta clear out the ghost town. At what point does a town get considered a ghost town? Huh. Weird. I guess this qualifies. Turns out Dusk has been hiding something deep below. And all I know is that they didn't call 811 before they started digging. Reach the end of the labs, you're met by some, Black Mesa scientists and their pet. We've already got something that I'm calling a horse, so, you know what, these guys are goats. Which breaks the HOA's regulation on what pets are allowed in the neighborhood. And it turns out, it's goats the whole way down. You aren't even halfway done with this cult. We got 2 more acts left. I'm going to put aside the jokes now. The Foothills are a really strong opening. I'm also going to drop the HOA stuff. This game deserves better than subpar gags written by a lackluster comedian. Now onward we march towards the facilities. Once you get there, you see the granary, or at least an area that maybe once held grain. We saw the farmhouse earlier. The corn is so dense you can walk on it. Nobody's harvesting anything. Not only that, they're storing hazardous material and using open flames, which is a huge no-no for working anywhere near fine dust particulate. Calling these guys Zuko, by the way. Make your way underground, you're able to see the massive expanse of power that all these facilities use. You're also met with a locked door, and the game is screaming at you to stay out. I'm the kind of person that if I see, hey, don't do something, I really want to do it. But this is another case where Dusk is doing its job, where I just did not want to go in there. The halls and rooms are uninhabited, save for the bodies of those that came before. There's a gasping sound. Something is clawing and scratching, trying to get closer. Objects all around you start getting flung here and there, and then it hurts you. Something is in here with you. Something unseen is trying to kill you. Something is making sure that Dusk has earned that horror tag on its Steam page. With a desperate prayer and a flash of gunpowder, you reveal the attacker. You're face to face with the Wendigo. Am I allowed to say that? I know that's its name, but it's also like a culturally significant creature. Just gonna keep it safe. Gonna call him Isaiah. So hunt down the rest of the Wendigoons, and you soon find yourself deeper in the factories. Apparently you're near the Thresher. The Navy is also here in full force. They've even set up turrets, but deal with them properly, and soon you can drop down into the infernal machine. The fall breaks your flashlight. Luckily, there is a pile of freshly mulched bodies beneath you. Follow the river of former humans, and you can find a brand new flashlight. Boy, I sure hope that doesn't happen anymore. Foreshadowing is a literary device in which fight through the machine, and you're soon able to escape the slaughterhouse. At this point, all I have are more questions and next to no answers. Hopefully the next level will shed some light on some things, right? It wouldn't just leave me more confused. Foreshadowing is a... Next up is the logical follow-up for a machine that grinds away at a person until there's nothing left. A corporate office. These are the Escher Labs, and while there aren't any cyber-headed snipers shooting at you, they really live up to their name. Pass by the producer, pick up a cute little reference for a different wacky FPS, and after you clear out Black Mesa scientists, something changes. The labs twist. You don't get much in the way of guidance anymore. Run down every hallway you see and soon you're... what the hell? The foundations of the building have shifted enough to allow another dimension to encroach. Mess up Mama, the first denizen of this weird new world, and make a break for it. And by luck would have it, you've just found the place that was powering the Escher Labs, the Erebus reactor. Remember 10 seconds ago when the building shifted enough to allow for gaps between dimensions on the last level? The reactor here is doing the same with the planet. It's wrenching open the Earth to siphon off energy however it can. Unfortunately, this is a gauntlet level, so you've got to fight your way through the waves of enemies and finally you can make a break for it. As you flee, you come face to face with your biggest threat yet. Big John. A man whose legacy is so big that he broke out of Rise of the Triad to be here. A man so amazing, he knows that he is being controlled by the cult, and he's begging for his death. A man so enticing that David Szymanski has confirmed he gets a substantial number of bitches. Anyway, get Mr. Biggs Johnson dealt with, and it's time to see what's been hiding inside the big smokestack he was guarding. That's not an innuendo. Use the jump pad inside, and you soon find yourself at the gates of Neo-Babel, a laboratory in the sky. If you hadn't noticed, we've long since slipped past the realm of small-town justice. Ever since the Escher Labs, we've been dealing with things beyond rational explanation. This is Neo-Babel, and if it has the same purpose as the original Tower of Babel, then it was built to reach the heavens, encroach on the skies above, to trespass into a land untainted with sin. Look at what you've made me do. Desecrate their chapel, and then you're allowed entrance to the depths of this floating crime against humanity. Dive deep enough and you break your flashlight again. Now, the only light you have is the flash of your muzzle and that strange green energy. Who would have thought, trapped in the dark deep below the secrets of a cult, you'd find enlightenment. Miles above the surface of Earth, you finally get some answers. The ruins held knowledge. We sold our souls for it. Altars built of concrete, fed with blood and bone. The Thresher's purpose has been revealed, and if you need any more proof, here it is. The energy is extracted from death. The remains of those that have been blended and minced into forms beyond recognition, humans, cultists, it seems like anything with form is used as fuel for this grotesque procedure. All of this for worship, all for power, all for nothing. You ascended to the heavens, you were met with the same damn enemies you find on Earth. If what they were worshipping didn't lie above, then it could only survive below. Make your way down, and something else becomes apparent. You're no longer in factories. This isn't a machine. You've gone beyond the processing plants. You are in the true areas of worship. These are the founding ruins. This is where everything started. The keys are becoming physical. The walls are built up with stone. The security is insane. You're getting close. Finish your act of familicide, and you're granted passage beyond. After some more mice, of course. You're met with a path to the left and a path to the right. For a level called the Gauntlet, sure seems pretty barren. Use one of these warp pads and you're shown exactly why it's so empty. The Guardian. A mostly skinless reptilian with a cannon for an arm. He's here. What better security is there? He threw the gauntlet. Only fair that I pick it up. Alas, he stood no chance against us, and I'm not merciful enough to forgive being shot at by a cannon. Turn him into fuel. You're done with the facilities. It's time for us to dive into the Nameless City. Which means it's up to us to give it a name. I'm thinking Detroit. Breaking out of the gate, it's time to step into the Iron Cathedral. If stone is what people worshipped with on Earth, then metal is what channels divinity here. No more blood and bone. Iron and fire are the conduits for blessings here. This area's got some really cool implied symbolism too. Iron is what pushed humans forward. Tools and weapons were now harder, more durable. The dig, last chapter, showed off cathedrals of stone and glass. Here, there are metal supports, tunnels, and the first weapon you get offered is a sword. A tool and a weapon that can overpower almost every enemy in the area with a single hit. If that weren't enough, the new enemies make a metallic screech whenever they see you. Calling them Sauron, by the way. They also just bumped DUSK's score up by at least 1/10 of a point for making me think of Lord of the Rings. Fight your way a little deeper into the cathedral, and you're met with the nefarious Grond! Okay, fine. No more Lord of the Rings references. Push on a little bit further, and you'll make it to the depths of this weird dimension, as well as up to the surface. There are the ruins of an old cathedral, a church fallen into disrepair. Wherever we are, it seems like it ran out of worshippers, so they had to invade our world. There are a bunch of wizrobes also flying around. I can see why people didn't want to stay here. Get through the gold bond gauntlet, and you've earned your access to employee housing? This whole place looks like a quaint little village full of, well, the inhabitants are the guys you've been fighting this whole time. So there are Martins, Isaiahs, Wizrobes, and Zorons all living in one place. At least it means less work to clear them out. Take a dip in the well, and you soon meet the community pet, Chomper. Clean her tank like I did my pet fish when I was 6, and she'll be dead in no time. Sorry again, Mario. After your brief dip in the village septic tank, you can make your way into the Crypt of Flesh, and, if you thought that there was even the slightest chance that what runs this world is a benevolent force, that hope is gone. The breathing is the first thing you hear through the walls. It's slow and painful. When you open the basement door, you see it, the first horror. It comes out to greet you. You also learn the closer they got, the more they suffered. This is the fate for people that went too far, got too close. And their design is, I'll be fully honest, 4 years ago, this probably would have terrified me. But now it just looks like it should be making Zach Hadel sounds or something. Overcome your fears, and you're rewarded with the final stretch. These next few levels kind of run together. They introduce new mechanics, but they all play off of each other really well. First off is Blasphemy, which seems to be a pretty fitting name. You need to fight off multiple waves of enemies to get access to a chapel, which is promptly destroyed by a storm. Take shelter underground and you make it to the Brimstone Ghetto, the last bit of familiarity in a collapsed world. And of course, it is crawling with monsters. Trudge through the worst that hell has to offer, and you find yourself fighting with Mike's, Gertrude's, and the Scarecrows from Act 1. Guess the familiarity hasn't run out yet. You finish off by stepping through a portal that brings you home. No, literally, it's called Homecoming. You're out of the factories, out of the churches, and back in a strange dreamscape modeled after the early levels. Hey, look, it's even the farm from level 2. The biggest mechanic here is one of the best in the game. The world is going to keep turning, and it drops you every single time it does. Near the end, you reach a home that Kathy seems to remember. Something happens, and it hurts to even think about it. Slip right back into the Escher Labs, and you're ready to take a walk down memory lane. Remember how Escher Labs was where things began to split from how they were, and now you've suddenly got a whole dimension to run back through? As above, so below. Time to start clawing our way up. Open your eyes, and you may recognize the Iron Cathedral. We're at the finish line. Run on through, and you're back in Pennsylvania. Well, the closest thing that hell can conjure up, so I guess you're in Philadelphia. Make it out of Patty's Pub, and you're at the Thresher. Then you're back in the Flesh Crypt. And now you're really small. And then you leap through the fire sections of the dig, and now you're in the cosmic ribcage of something? Ooh, now you're back at the Infernal Machine. But only for a moment. You're back at the Iron Cathedral. You're back to the start. You've made it back to the finish line. You're back at the start. You walk down another catacomb, but what does it matter? You're back to the start. You fight through a few more Mikes and Saurons, but you're still back at the start. Even when you walk up to the hanging meat hooks and you impale yourself, you already knew. You were back at the start. 2 levels left. We got this. Your last test is to fight off the Dwellers in the Darkness. Here's your chance to take all of your anger and frustrations out on the monsters that have tormented you this entire game. You're ready. There's enough ammo for every one of your guns and more than enough health to go around. This is your prize for walking out of hell. You get to blast down the hallway at everything that tries to follow you out. Pick a god you think will listen, make a prayer, and fire. You have 270 targets to aim at. Or if that's not your style, you can do a bit of platforming and take the easy way out. That's what I'd do if I were in Kathy's shoes. No matter how you choose to face it, be your courage liquid or solid, up next is the final duel. The person behind all of this, the voice that's been goading you into continuing this entire time. His name's Jacob, and he's human. Surprisingly, he's the only other definite human. Big John was being controlled. Every other enemy thus far is either masked or inhuman in essence. He moves like you, fights like you. Hell, he uses the same weapons as you. Unfortunately, he hasn't been through what you have. He doesn't know the meaning of pain, of suffering. He doesn't deserve to lead. Knock him down and the cult realizes it too. They tear him into pieces. With Jacob dealt with, you're free. A staircase appears and you're good to just go. You fought through the night. You deserve a break. Hey, what do you think they were worshipping in the first place? Ugh. Here comes Lovecraft, rearing his ugly head. Let's show him what the consequence of messing with humanity is. He's responsible for the deaths of thousands, possibly millions. Their memory won't just be trampled on. No more cathedrals. No more crypts. I'm bringing him into the light. He won't stop me anymore.
And you will be their savior. Your strength will be...
What? You thought you actually stood a chance? It's the same story. There is no golden ending. You just challenged an eldritch god to a staring match and you blinked. Remember, Jacob thought he was worthy too. You just created a job opening that you fit perfectly. Guess all you can do now is hope that someone else decides to make the journey and challenge you for the throne. Beneath Dusk. Sheesh. Is that how this channel is going to go? I go from a depressing ending to a happy ending to a depressing ending? Next game better be happy. But before I can reveal that to you, I gotta give it some praise. Dusk really feels great to play. There's a healthy amount of humor, and the atmosphere sprinkled throughout is immaculate. Not to mention the amount of options and customization that the game has. You have so much variability. You can change almost everything, from the field of view to the colors you'll see as you play through. If you really hate your vision, you could even play with clown vomit as the color palette, which I don't recommend it, but you do you. For the most part, the level design is also amazing. It feels like someone had issues with some of the limitations in the classic Doom or Quake series, and they chose to make mechanics that bypass those entirely. If you're good at games, unlike me, then you'll probably be able to take advantage of the fact that there's no limit to the Y-axis. You can do flips like you're earning style points. You also deal insane damage with the little throwable bar of soap. I showed it happening once, but you can genuinely beat the game cleaning off all the enemies. I mentioned that it has a horror tag earlier, but it's also ridiculously funny. Once you know where the horrors or the wendigos are going to spawn, they stop being a jump scare and they start being the victim. Ooh, and look at what happens if you equip the mythical 10th weapon. If you were a fan of FPS games, boomer shooters, Doom clones, Twitch shooters, whatever you want to call them, go ahead and treat yourself. Dusk is great. The amount of polish and content and replayability is something that really outmatches the price tag. Not only that, but if you've been a fan of any recent shooters in this style, you might even need to thank Dusk for reviving the genre. It really caused them to explode in popularity. Early on in the video, I mentioned that Dusk felt like if you put a bunch of different games in a blender with something else. That special ingredient was Bloodborne. Spoilers ahead, by the way. They start similarly. You wake up in a weird location, have to fight your way through a horde of big enemies, including just some strange-looking jokers, with the idea that whatever is behind it all is something manageable. A plague versus a cult, in this case. They even share a very similar ending. Once you reach it, it's revealed that there's a cosmic entity behind everything. In Bloodborne, it's the moon. In Dusk, it's Nyarlathotep? Is that how you say that? Names aside, there's also a kind of strange twist. Bloodborne has the more hopeful of endings. Dusk has one ending. You get enslaved. There's no way around it. Bloodborne has 3 endings, and only one of them has you go enthralled. You either wake up and go free, you ascend to godhood yourself, or you become a slave to the elder god. That's 2 more good endings than Dusk has. And, okay, dropping the comparison real quick. Dusk is super generous with the ammo, health, and armor. It really rewards you just for exploring. But if you don't want to, there's a huge roster of cheats too. Which I did not do. I beat the game normally. I did, however, use them to gather footage, but come on. However, I would be a pretty bad reviewer if I couldn't at least point out some complaints too, right? As for things that I think can be improved, I don't really have much. Sorry. You may have noticed in the footage that I mostly use the shotguns or one of the 2 explosives. I have such a wide arsenal of things to use, but the enemies don't necessitate much strategy. When I went through the Wikipedia page to gather pictures of them, it just revealed that the strategy to fighting most of these enemies is that they are all weak to high damaging attacks. Yeah, most things are. Another small issue I have is something that no game made after 2010 should have. The levels don't have checkpoints. And I get that you're going for a classic boomer shooter feel, but nothing was worse than making it through a pretty long level and then just falling into a bottomless pit. Looking at you, Escher Labs. You could manually save, But I know that I didn't ever want to stop the action and have to go through that rigmarole when I just had to be good enough to not die. And I mentioned it earlier, a lot of these levels are really well designed. There are a few where that's not really the case. You might see a little pop-up that just says, "Oh, a door has been opened." But if you never noticed a closed door to begin with, or if you never noticed something was a door, you're just going to have to search the whole level for it. Dusk is a really good game, but even diamonds have to be polished a little bit. Okay, I guess it's time for my closing thoughts. See, I told you I didn't have many complaints. I'm going to do that thing I do again, where I get really heavy and serious at the final score section of the video. I enjoyed Dusk. I really did. I just kind of wish I had played it outside of this channel first. There are a total of 33 stages, and it was pretty slow to grab me. At times, when I was just playing through it, it kind of felt more like an obligation. At the end of Act 1, I was kind of hesitant, and I wondered if I should just scrap the episode and if I should do something else. I could force myself to rush through it, hate the whole process, give it a 1.0, call it there. That would have been the end of the review. I'd be talking about how I didn't have my attention grabbed. Not at all any fault of the game or David Szymanski, but at my own. I just didn't have a reason to keep going through it. I'd beat a level, think, that was fun. But at the same time, I've also been playing through Blueprints and Fantasy Life I. If the games were in competition, then I kind of felt like my attention could have been better distributed. And then something happened in my life. Something that I didn't think was very fair. It didn't feel nice. It left me feeling pretty powerless. I was in a pretty dark spot, and I was spiraling. At the time, what I wanted the most was just an outlet. I needed a way to vent. I was so... Ugh. And then I realized what I had just turned away from. The outlet that I had been wanting. Obviously, I was in a very different spot than Dusk Dude, but that anger and frustration was there all the same. If you know me, or if you are able to pick up on the small details, you probably noticed that there was a different tone between the first part of the video and the second part. That's why. I'm a different person than I was when I started writing the script. Which is why I can confidently say, I think Dusk deserves a 7.8 out of 10. I had fun with it. It was fun to play. There's a lot of accessibility options. There's ways to customize it to feel as good as possible for you. But the limited weapon use, dizzying as hell levels, and a bit of an inconsistent tone, I know that it's not going to be for everyone. And I'm saying all of this, but if you think that you'll like it, jump right in. Maybe you can take your place as the one that reigns beneath Dusk. Well, that one ended on a bit of a heavy note. I think I'm glad to be returning this one to the library. I'll probably check it out again at some point, but right now I think I gotta step away from the FPS. There is a difficulty setting that I kind of want to try. You die in one hit, so of course just, do a lot of wiggling and nobody can hit you. But for now, I'm more excited to move on to something a bit more colorful. Let's see. Next month's video is gonna be... Oh. Crap. Till next time.